Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us. I hope everyone's had at least one coffee. It is nice to have a slightly later start though. I'm Kate Calder, Head of BD here at DeakinCo, and what a topic, leadership in the VUCA world. We're really excited about it, and in fact I was listening into our panelists and I think they've already workshopped all of the leadership problems that we all have, so I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. So the team and I see 100 clients a month face to face, and leadership comes up all the time as the greatest challenge for every organisation. And I can see by the turnout today that there are plenty of folks interested in sharing information and learning from one another on the topic. So today we have an esteemed panel, and by way of introduction we have Marcele de Sanctis. Marcele completed her PhD as an org psych at Deakin, of course, and is currently CEO of the Centre for Leadership Advantage, her business, and she founded the business to help organisations navigate their leadership challenges. And we have Marisa Cursio, who is from Telstra. Marisa holds a Masters in Adult Education, has worked at ANZ Melbourne Water, and is currently in a pioneering role as a learning content curator. So you can ask her about that role and what it does if you like. And her focus is on capability uplift across the business. And then we have, last but not least, Chris Styring. Chris is responsible for talent development at Fluor, which is a US multinational, which a Fortune 500 company. Fluor delivers engineering, procurement, fabrication, construction and maintenance solutions. And for those of you who haven't heard of it, it has a global annual revenue of over 19.4 billion. That was last year's figures. So it's a big company. And Chris has some wonderful stories about leadership across the globe. And then Amanda Pyman will facilitate for us today. Amanda is a professor and head of management here at Deakin and is widely published and has helped many organisations and individuals through MBA programs learn and research how to maximise leadership effectiveness. Amanda will kick us off with a number of questions that we think will be of interest to everyone. Following that, there are 3 seats.
Just at the front here.
At the front here, the ones that don't have brochures on them. And folks are invited to come and take a seat. It's effectively a cue to ask the question that is of the greatest interest to you of the panel. And so just keep on coming up, rotating up, and these things sort of evolve organically. We've found them tremendously interesting and effective. Don't be shy. I might have to call on a couple of my colleagues if we have a slow start, but please, we welcome all and every question.
Welcome everybody, good morning. I have the fairly easy job, I think, of facilitating this discussion from this esteemed panel. But first let me introduce this idea of leadership in a VUCA world. So VUCA, we all know, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It's very common parlance in business schools and particularly in MBA and executive MBA programs. But it's a term that's bandied about a lot, perhaps with little understanding of what it means. I think it's quite straightforward in terms of its meaning, in terms of referring to really the specific dynamics that we face in business and industry and being the normal landscape now that leaders operate within. It's clearly being driven by a number of mega trends: globalisation, technology, digitalisation, the move from collectivism to individualisation, demographic change, economic crisis. I think there is a tendency to associate VUCA with the negative connotations politically and socially in the world that we face, and that's certainly an important part of the landscape. But really what we want to focus on today is the necessary mindsets and skill sets and knowledge sets that leaders need in business to navigate this very uncertain and complex world in which they operate. So I'm going to pose a number of questions to our panel members and ask each of them to speak. And then we will rotate it to the audience participation part. I know that will be your favourite part of the morning. So please, again, don't be shy, come up and participate and pose a question in your own context that you're facing about leadership in a VUCA world. So we're going to start at the individual level, and Marisa, I'll start with you. What are the hallmarks of effective individual leadership in a VUCA world? And perhaps you can think about both mindsets and skill sets and knowledge sets in telling us about your view.
Sure, thank you. I'll give a Telstra view in regards, which is not a view I don't believe in, it's a view I support in regards to enterprise leadership. There's a lot of work that we're doing at Telstra with our leaders to work across the enterprise, and this is something that I believe leaders don't necessarily understand or have worked with before, where in a large organisation we have leaders working in silos. They're doing really great things with their teams, but they're not working across the enterprise. That's where we get 21 systems that do exactly the same thing. That's where we get teams that do exactly the same thing. So they're actually not talking to each other and they're not working across the enterprise, which makes it more complex, which creates ambiguity. So that's a Telstra example that I think is really important. There's a long way to go. One of our capabilities is to hold our leaders accountable in driving enterprise accountability. So that will be part of their scorecard.
Thanks very much. Marcele?
In thinking about, I guess, the hallmarks, I'm an organisational psych, so come at things very much from a measurement angle and really defining whether it be skills, capabilities, innate abilities around cognition and so forth, or more behavioural approaches. But what I see, I think, as being really critical for leadership in a VUCA world is, picking up on your point, Marisa, this notion of being able to influence in all directions and use that as a strategy and something, having a lot of influencing strategies in one's toolkit to work effectively across an organisation. That is in a lot of the leadership development programs that we design and deliver, constantly coming up as a theme that people need to be capable in. And when we do assessment of leadership, be it high potentials or so forth, that is often a glaring gap around capability. I think the second area is around having exceptional judgment. So without a doubt, leaders are having a lot of information come to them really rapidly. So there's a real need to analyse, synthesise and really quickly make decisions, but exercise really good judgment in doing so. We've kind of coined a term at CLA called the Leadership Analytics Quotient, LAQ, which is all about this mix of not only intellectual horsepower or cognitive ability, but the ability to apply that to drive decision making in a course of action. So they're really important. The last thing I'll say though is, interestingly, I think leading in a VUCA world is actually all about, in many ways, sticking to your strengths and knowing what you're really good at and exercising caution where appropriate as opposed to kind of adapting to everything. And there was a really good article in the, might have been the Weekend Fin Review a little while ago, where three entrepreneurs, it was Anthony Pratt, I think it was Jeff Ryan from Flight Centre, and another gentleman were talking about how they know now, after years of experience, what not to invest in, and by sticking to their strengths, even though the world around them is changing, that's actually a core part of their business. So it's really an interesting sort of balance around that adaptive mindset, but at the same time being risk averse.
Great, thank you. Chris?
A couple of things with our leaders that we've seen come through and help us in times of volatility and ambiguity is we have to have a vision for the future. If the leaders don't talk about how we get out of where we currently are, there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty that comes from the employees. Our leaders also need to be selfless in this uncertain time. If they are selfish, they'll be self-centred and won't look at the bigger picture. So from that point of view, we do always like to get some consistent communication from our leaders about the future rather than answering every question that comes from the day-to-day. But every employee is worried about the day-to-day, but our leaders need to be 3 months, 6 months beyond where we are now. So that helps us to get through the volatility. Our company has had a lot of volatility with iron ore prices, commodities, big companies holding off investments, and handling that within the company has been a real challenge. If we are clear and consistent with our communication and the timing of when things will come in, that has helped a lot.
Great, thank you. So it strikes me that a key theme in what all of you are saying is the need for a view of the system itself and the ability to navigate perhaps complexity across different parts of the enterprise or the organisation. And I think, Marcele, your point is well made about the need to exercise judgment. Judgment has never been more important. But finding the space to do that is often hard because of the dynamic pace at which organisations are working. So leaders need to feel comfortable in sometimes perhaps just putting the brakes on and using some of that space and time to reflect as well as exercise judgment in making decisions rather than feeling that we always have to make decisions at that moment or in that moment. I think doing that is a challenge in some way. All right, let's turn to the concept of the organisation now, because we know leadership is not about individuals. It's rarely about individuals. I think we've moved a long way from the notion of sort of hero leaders and leaders being put on a pedestal. But if we think about what differentiates organisations collectively in the VUCA world, what are some of the characteristics that you could point to the audience that differentiate organisations in this complex world in which we're operating?
I'll go. You need to have a change plan. You need to have a change plan that is able to help people understand what's going on and how you're going to get through the VUCA world. Some companies have good change plans. Some people start a plan and don't finish it. I think that creates a grey zone for organisations as well. You have to have a lot of respect for individuals within the organisation. The larger the organisation, it is harder to do that, but you need to do it at a local level, and that helps to reassure people through that change process. The different elements of change, you need to go through that to ensure that people are clear about the stages and what's going to be at the end. So where you are now, where you'd like to get to, and how do you manage that grey zone in the middle is something that differentiates good companies through this stage.
And thinking, Chris, about what success looks like, that helps with the end point?
It does. I think you need to take your employees on a journey. It doesn't matter whether they're 1 year with the company, 30 years with the company. We have some with 40 years with the company, but they are interested in the journey and the story to get to where we need to go. And if you take people, if you're open about that with people and you don't hide information from the organisation or the teams, people then say, I understand where we're going. And they'll make decisions about whether they want to stay or look elsewhere. We did some stats this week on our turnover for a proposal, and our turnover, voluntary turnover is 2%. And we have been in a volatile market for probably 3 years now. So that's pretty good. So we're doing something right, but we still need to communicate a lot better, I believe.
Can I? Sure. I agree. With our strategy of becoming a world-class technology organisation, not a telecommunications organisation, that's a big change. And bringing everyone along that journey requires a lot of communication, like you said, and really helping our teams to understand how they contribute to that and what that change will look like. Honestly, it's uncertain. What will that mean in 2020 for us? we can't. It's hard to imagine. I'm not that technical. I'm in HR, but it's hard to imagine. So, how do we bring everybody along that journey to really help them understand this is the vision and this is the strategy, but what does that mean to you in your role? How do you contribute to that? Whether you're in the Philippines answering the phones or whether you're developing automation.
So Marcele, why are organisations so poor then at change management across the board?
Yeah, so I think when I think about that system element, there's a couple of things that come to mind. Organisations that seem to navigate it well are really agile and can take products and services to market really quickly, despite how big they may be or how complex they may be. And I think that's because they deploy a test and learn approach. So they'll go to the market, or they'll create incubators or whatever it is to test things, and they'll learn quickly. If they're going to fail, they'll fail quickly, and they'll be honest with the market around trialling things or piloting things. And that test and learn approach is a really nice way of, I think, evolving reasonably quickly. In terms of the poor change management, look, a lot of factors. I think there's individual factors around leadership, clarity, having crystal clear clarity of where we're going and what we need to do and why this is important, and communicating that rationale. One of our colleagues, or one of the psychs in our team at CLA, used to work with one of the big 4 banks, and I remember chatting to her about what the CEO's role would be in rolling out change, and she said basically he was on the road repeating himself for 3 months, and he would just be saying the same messages to lots of different people. So that consistency and that repetition is actually really, really important, and I don't think it can be emphasised enough.
Okay, so fail fast and learn from failure. Good messages in that. I think too often we see failure in the business world as being a very negative experience for organisations. So just picking up on the point of agility, how do we foster that in organisations? How do we foster them to be agile when there is such uncertainty, and perhaps it is hard to predict 5 years from now how it will impact on roles? How can we give people a level of comfort whilst also remaining agile?
So it's difficult. I guess from a leadership point of view, we try to work with organisations to create a safety net so that people have a safe space in which to make mistakes and learn from them. And get people comfortable with the notion of uncertainty and having less at their disposal to make decisions with. So really teaching people sort of what are the guiding principles or the 3 criteria that you need to apply to decisions that you need to make, and rely on that and see how you go with it, rather than try to sort of overcook it and overanalyze. So it's difficult, it takes practice, it's all about breaking habits, but I think that's kind of one way to support it at an individual level. And then systemically, I guess it's creating the space and the structures in which to support that. So physical working spaces, having that time to explore, I think. But it's really difficult, and it's hard for leaders when they don't know to try to communicate certainty. But I think having some sort of guiding principles to drive decision making can help.
Yeah. I think just reflecting on that, it goes back to trust. Within our role, within global learning and building on the curation team, and what does that look like, and what do our capability frameworks look like, and launching a My Career Portal, piloting, I keep using the wrong word, a My Career Portal next week. It's been changed, do it differently, fix that up, change it again. And it's that trust that we have. We're not controlled. We can make those decisions. We're trusted to make a mistake. We're trusted to fix it. We're trusted in regards to our thought leadership on how it will work. Yeah, I know that's kind of a granular response because I just spoke about enterprise and this is team specific, but it's that trust where we've had to drop everything and change very, very quickly and just work in that agile environment to really achieve what we wanted to achieve.
Just lastly, there's a lot of work being done at the moment around measuring leadership, not at the level of the individual in terms of skills and capabilities that the individual brings, but on the signature environment that the leader creates, i.e. the leadership impact. And by measuring leadership effectiveness, because my view is leadership doesn't exist without another person to lead, and it's actually experienced at the level of the person receiving the leadership. So it needs to be measured in terms of effectiveness, in terms of its impact on somebody. So there's a lot of work being done around what signature environments leaders create, and that is the level at which effectiveness is determined. And those signature environments are ones that are characterised by trust, clarity and momentum. Yeah.
Thank you. That leads us nicely into the concept, if we hone in on the idea of technology and perhaps more broadly digitisation. Anybody can start. Marisa, you don't have to start. So let me pose the question. As emerging technologies are being rapidly integrated into business, how important is the idea of what we might call digital intelligence among employees? So we know about cultural intelligence, we know about emotional intelligence. If we think about a notion of digital intelligence, how important is that in the dynamic business world today?
We haven't done a lot in this area. So what we have done is we've used technology on 3D modelling. So for a client, we'll produce a 3D model and present that to them to say, this is what your mind will look like, so they can see it rather than in drawings. I think from a cyber security point of view, our company does a lot in that area. But what you're talking about, we're probably a little bit behind, so I'll be interested in maybe what Telstra is doing.
I knew that would come up.
I'm not technical. I have no idea, right? So I just want to put that out there. There's a lot of work that's been done by a career architecture team in regards to labour strategy, and a part of our capability framework is actually building the digital intelligence and the skills. And a lot of our capability framework is focusing on the technical skills that we need. There's soft skills there too, but the technical skills are the ones that have been prioritised. We need to build that labour, or we need to buy that labour. Buying that labour from Google and IBM and other technical companies is difficult. So we have a team called Career Architecture or Labour Strategy, both of those teams. They're working on that and forecasting what we need and what that looks like. So they've done a lot of work on that. They've modelled it. They've got a vision. We need to execute it though.
I know there's a lot of research, and Deakin with Deloitte Access Economics did the paper recently around digital intelligence, or the capacity to work with digital information and technology is going to be a critical skill for workforces of the future. So yeah, I think it's critically important, and I come back to that the LAQ element around being able to work with the increasing amount of information that's coming our way, which I think is only going to get more and more, and be able to synthesise and wade through it. So I think it's really critical, but it's also important to be really mindful of workforce demographics and in an organisation, the degree to which people are comfortable working with technology. There's some really great programs around reverse mentoring, where pairing up employees from different demographics and generations to sort of exchange knowledge transfer and get comfortable with the idea of working with technology. So I think it's going to be really important as a key capability going forward, and we need to think about how we support that.
Just a thought. We've been doing some work with some universities in regards to understanding how the grads are coming through and what they're training in, and we've discovered that what they learn at uni is it can become very outdated by the time they join the workforce. So there's some work that our Chief Technology Office is doing around that as well.
I will leave that alone, but the importance of academe and industry working together, we could talk about that all morning. And I think, it goes back to some of the points made earlier about that open mindset, having the flexibility to fail and the safety to fail as well in terms of the technology side of things. But some good examples there as to what you're doing. Let's shift now to, and I think it was a point that Marcele made, we know that leadership is not about the individuals, so let's think about perhaps what we might call high potential employees. And my question to you now is thinking about those that you lead and that we lead in organisations in this fast-paced, dynamic business environment. How can we ensure that high potential employees are retained and that we're building and continuously building that leadership pipeline? How can organisations ensure that work is being done?
Okay, I'll kick off this one. This is quite a passion of mine within our organisation. High potential individuals, how do you spot them? Do they have a badge on them saying I'm a high potential? No. Are they high performers in terms of output of work? Probably. But the high potential, there's an element, there's something untangible about them that you need to know, pick up, observe. And once you identify that, there's different ways of doing that with systems and assessments. But most organisations know if you said, okay, tell us your top 10% of employees who are high potentials, you could get the list together pretty quickly. How that list was put together, maybe they can't explain everything about a high potential, but they know. You can't always see it, but you can feel it from an individual. In times of volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, high potentials are really important to help them. They are demanding of the organisation because they perform at a very high level for you. So you need to get around them with a mentoring program, an accelerated program of some sort. You need to talk to them to say, we're doing this for you for these reasons at this point in time. So you assure them that they are still important for the organisation. How do you differentiate that between other employees is a bit of a challenge for organisations. You can't have preferential treatment of people, but you can have programs and reasons why people are in those programs to maintain them. We have lost some good high potentials in the recent years, but we've held on to really good people as well by putting them into a position that may not suit them for the next 6 months, but we said we need to put you there because we're waiting for a project to come up and you're listed to go on that project. So open communication to the individual really helps to reassure them. And also you need to find out what their connection points are to the organisation. Why do they work for you? Is it the leaders? Is it the brand? Is it the work? Is it the project? You need to know what those connection points are. And you only get to find that out by talking to them, building the relationships, having formal and informal communications, meetings with them, and you bring them close to you so that you know what's going on. You need to know where their motivations are, because a high potential motivation level is quite often high most of the time. You need to notice it when it dips down and you need to ask them what's happening. At our company, we have a lot of local and global programs for high potentials. I could rattle them off, but I think that might be a bit too much. But companies do a lot in this area, and it's exciting to see people progress through the organisation as well. One of our biggest challenges is we have frameworks of development which in the past have taken 15 to 20 years for a lot of our engineers to get to a certain level. But the newer graduate engineers saying, I'm not going to wait 15 years to be engineer 3, I want it in 5 to 8 years. So there's a real challenge within the organisation with the younger generation coming in and expecting to progress faster than what has the company experienced in the past. So that throws up other things for us to consider. But that's healthy, I think. If a high potential young person comes in and says, I want to be here in 8 years, we shouldn't say no. We should say, okay, how do we get there? how do we help you get there? Because the government, the company will benefit from that just as much as the individual.
Thank you, Chris.
So I think it's really important to define what potential is first in the VUCA world, and really distill that. And when I think about that, I don't always mean going straight to a really comprehensive capability framework. It could be something which is wonderful, but can become really convoluted. But actually just distilling what we like to call success factors. What are the success factors, and there might be 6 of them related to different head or hats that an individual might wear, that will hallmark success and define what potential looks like. So that's kind of one point. I guess in terms of Chris's, your view around the leadership experiences, I'm a big fan of fostering high potentials by giving them what I'd call leadership experiences, not just leadership experience. So it's actually about giving them lots of different things to do, and that's really common in big multinationals. I know Ford does it, where their high potentials are carted off to hardship locations and really pushed to lead in those environments to build up those experiences and that really rich tapestry of exposure. The other comment that I'll make is around using non-traditional forms of measuring potential, such as the credentials. So where we know what skills are required for future workforces, and we know that it's not just traditional qualifications that are going to determine whether someone's successful or not. So thinking about non-traditional ways of assessing capability and potential. And in HBR in 2014, there was a great article called 21st Century Talent Spotting, and it was all about saying that we need to move away from the brightest MBAs as the future leaders only, and realise that actually potential can come in lots of different shapes and forms, and recognising that, such as through demonstration of evidence, applied learning and acquired skills and capability, not acquired through a degree, is a really important way of managing it.
Yeah. So let me pose the question about leadership development in particular, and you've talked about the importance of high potentials and how we might think about those, and what experiences we may give those employees. A recent report by Deloitte showed that not only do organisations spend a lot of money on leadership development, but that most feel it's pretty poor in terms of what they get out of it. So what needs to change in this environment? And Chris, you touched on some of that in terms of thinking about how do our leadership development programs need to evolve given the different environment in which we work.
Leadership programs won't change a person 20-80%. You might get a change of 5 to 10% in some behaviours or skills that they learn. So I think we need to be realistic about what a leadership program will deliver for an organisation. Defining what the outcome is of a leadership program is difficult, because it is working on skills and behaviours that you want to instil in the individual, and those who are naturally geared to be strong leaders will pick that up easily. Those who are not gifted in this area naturally will learn the skill and the behaviour and implement it. So there's 2 types of leaders that we need to break the leadership programs down into. Everyone's expectation of a leadership program is different, and that varies from company to company. We run different leadership programs within our organisation. Some I think are really good, some we could probably shelve because we don't know what the outcomes are. However, some of the outcomes that you want for your leadership are the skills around honouring and respecting the individual, understanding where they're coming from and what they can do for the organisation. As Marcele said, you're only a leader if you're leading people. So it is up to you to lead those people and to get feedback from them as well. So there's a lot of feedback loops in leadership programs that I think are improving. Short-term and also long-term leadership programs should have feedback loops at least 6 months beyond the program, so that you can see some change within individuals.
So I think people can be leaders or they can be thought leaders in their field, absolutely. But I think that a lot of it is that leadership is relationship as well. So that's sort of where I was coming from there. I know that there's motivation to learn is a strong predictor of applied learning in the workplace post-program. I was at an industrial org site conference last week held by the APS, and there was a student out of Adelaide doing some PhD research around the predictive power of motivation to learn and then actual transfer of learning back on job. And that seems to be a really important element. So I think incorporating into leadership development programs, be it pre-program, during program, post-program, measures of motivation is really critical. And also incorporating accountability. So how is it that whether it be incorporating a line manager at the end of a program into a triad feedback discussion with the participant to really start to foster accountability? How do you integrate behaviours that you want to see applied into performance appraisal systems and cycles? So that sort of stuff, I think, is where the rubber can start to hit the road. But it's still really hard to quantify the impact of development and to justify to organisations the ROI.
Thank you.
Yep. I agree 100%. Our programs are great. They get really good feedback. There's been a lot of work in regards to our leadership programs on ensuring that there's education, experience, exposure and environment. So our leaders experience across the 4E continuous learning cycle. And it's not just about education, and it's not just about going away to a winery for a week and having a good time either. So, they're held accountable for that at the end of the program. They have the triads. And they're surveyed as well. They're leadership surveys run by our leadership and talent team. So and that's evolved. That's been the change we've gone through this year, because the programs were great, but they weren't measured.
Okay, some positive directions then for thinking about how we might measure and get more out of leadership development programs. A nice easy one now around resilience and well-being. So in a dynamic environment, how do we foster resilience and well-being in leaders and in organisations, resilience in organisations in a VUCA world?
So my comment on that would be that I think it's important to define what success looks like in a VUCA world first, and redefine that it might not necessarily mean rushing, doing everything really fast and putting a lot of pressure on ourselves, even though it kind of looks like that and there's a lot out there. I think it's just sort of trying to find that quiet time to reflect and redefine, because it's really difficult, and there's so much more research around mental health and well-being now, and it's just exploding because people are really feeling the effects, and it's not good. And there's a huge increase in burnout and stress, and it's really full on. So thinking about redefining what does success look like, and as much as possible, I think is really important first, to then be able to foster that well-being, because it's really difficult. And I guess it's having great leaders who can lead. Work-life integration seems to be a term that is coming more to the forefront, but I think there's a lot more still to be done in the space, and I'm not fully across all of it, but that would be sort of my initial thinking.
At Telstra, we have an amazing work-life balance culture. Sometimes I'll walk into the building. I'm not much of a work from home person. I get my energy from people. I live by myself, so it's a bit boring. So working from home. Sometimes I'll walk in the office and there's like 4 people on the floor. And because everyone's working from home, when school holidays have just been and gone, people stayed home during the school holidays. They worked, their goals were still met, their work was not impacted, but it gave them that opportunity to organise babysitting, whatever they needed to do, and they can do school drop-offs, ballet, recitals, whatever happens, male, female, doesn't matter. No one asks where you are. We have cameras, so not watching us, but when we dial in, you can dial in from your camera, and people are sitting there, and you see the cat walk past, and I was at home one day and they saw the painter. So the work-life balance, you can work from anywhere. If you move interstate, you keep your job. You don't lose your job, you just work from a different office, or you work at your beach house. It doesn't matter, we're all mobile, so that creates a great culture. It helps with resilience as well. I'm not saying people are not overworked, but it gives them that time. Instead of commuting into the office, you might get an extra half an hour sleep in, and that might help.
I think that's a good point. I think there's probably most of the progress in this space has been around flexibility in working arrangements, rather than tackling some of the more fundamental, very complex issues around mental health and what it means to be resilient. And I think, Marcele, as you touched on what success looks like, and creating those different mindsets among leaders and employees. Chris, would you like to add?
Yes, I would. Just two things. What I've seen within our organisation is when people are stressed or we are under uncertainty and ambiguity, EAP programs are utilised a lot more as part of our wellbeing offerings for employees, which is good. In terms of resilience and stress levels, most companies are resilient, so most companies, Telstra and Fluor, will continue for many years. The individual stress and resilience, we don't really know. So what stresses me may be different to other people. And what that stress point is could be something work-related or could be personal-related. We don't know, so we need to give people the time and space to be able to work through that, or as managers or leaders, see the behaviours when they change so that we can check in with people to have a coffee, have a chat about their work and their life and see how things are going for them. I'm not sure whether organisations and managers do that really well all the time, but that's self-resilience that I think is important as an individual within organisations. And the Mel Gibson What Women Want movie, when he could read and understand what women were saying all the time. You have many people walking through the office floor and you don't know what's on their mind. You don't know whether they've kicked the cat in the morning before they came to work or had a fight. So as managers and team leaders, we need to be able to check in with individuals to make sure that they are accessing the services that they need and that we are listening and showing a level of care for them.
Thank you. All right, we are going to hand it over to the audience for a little while. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer, and I know people in the room too, so look out. It won't just be Kate and Georgie tapping shoulders. So who would like to come on down and ask our esteemed panel a question and perhaps something that you're facing in your own context? Please.
I'm involved in...
There you go.
Oh.
You can sit up
You
there.
sit up there. You join us.
Okay, if you like. I'm a retired professor in health informatics, which is a very new discipline. And so I'm very, very interested in the digital intelligence that you mentioned. But also, being from the health industry, it's very different sort of leadership situation than what you find in enterprises. So on the one hand, you were talking about leadership in enterprises where people in leadership have leadership positions. They're allocated in that position. Whereas in the health industry, people have professional positions that are often in conflict with the management and leadership type positions within those organisations. And the other thing is that the professions involved in the health industry are many and varied. And so there is a lot of volunteer type professional leadership that is needed. And that's the area that I'm involved in trying to lead professions in embracing the digital technologies. And what I'm finding is that in the education organisations, the people who are teaching our new graduates don't understand health informatics. So it's not included in their graduate programs. And as a consequence of that, we have a health workforce that is not well prepared for actually managing the new technologies in that way. And then we also have the problem of collaboration, because we need to be very collaborative because of the variety of skills and knowledge. So these are some of the issues that we're dealing with, which is very different to the sort of leadership you're talking about.
Such a good point. So I wear a hat. I'm a casual academic at Deakin and supervise and examine master's students of org psych and their dissertations, and there's a really great piece of research being done, so I'll share with you around workforce readiness for graduates for allied health sectors. And it is, you're right, very, very different skills that are required to bridge that gap to go into leadership roles, but also graduate and entry-level roles in those organisations. Digital being, I guess, digital intelligence and comfort being one part of it, but a whole lot of soft skills that are thrown up that are quite different. So I think it's, in terms of the work readiness, quite an emerging area. What have you seen sort of that's worked thus far, or that, if anything, or sort of defining what good looks like?
I don't know, I've been involved in it for 30 years and I've been involved internationally and nationally with a lot of leadership sort of stuff. And the leadership impact, I mean, it's driven by individual passion and enthusiasm and a lot of knowledge and skills, a lot of self-development and networking with a lot of different people, multiple disciplinary. So that's what works. What we're finding is we're very frustrated because the managers and decision makers are not listening to the people who've got the expertise. And that is primarily because they don't understand the impact of the decisions that they're making. So when major decisions made in government, some of us, we already know it's not going to work because there are some fundamental principles that they're just missing. And so it is about, managing data, managing the context of that data, managing the complexity, and the constant changes in the technology itself.
But regardless of where you work and what organisation, as an individual, you have your sphere of influence that you can have an impact on around you. So maybe in the health industry or organisations, there's a lot of processes and procedures that everyone has to follow. But you need to make that work for you within your area of expertise with the people that you come into contact with. So growing that influence for yourself and others and having that passion is the way you can probably make change.
Well, we've done a lot of leadership in that area, but it's really based on volunteer work. And I guess that's the problem. We don't get the funding, we don't get the support to really lead this. And so it's extremely difficult. And the other thing is that you have multiple professional organisations who all have their own vision and their own ideas, and we really need to have a consolidated national approach to these sort of issues. So my question is, how do you get this leadership happening so that we do have a consolidated national approach that people understand the vision? It's a complex area. So it's a very difficult one to really measure and to get across. And the other thing that I'm finding is that most people tend to concentrate on the little things that they're working in, their own little sphere, their own little world, without really understanding or having an appreciation of the bigger picture and where their particular contribution actually impacts on the bigger picture. So I think we need to get some assistance and people to understand some of these issues and work through collaboratively to really make a difference, I think.
Yeah.
But I'd love your ideas in terms of how to actually improve this situation.
One thought that comes to mind, I know in organisations and probably in a lot of professions, it's about finding what I'd call the pivotal leaders, or those individuals that have the multiplier effect on others. They might be the high potentials. They could be at any level of an organisation or entity or institution. Who are the pivotal people that have the capacity, the strategies in their toolkit to influence upwards? So this is back to the influencing being a key skill set, and maybe it's through those individuals and harnessing those to kind of get the messages powerfully communicated upwards as well as downwards, as one idea.
I think it goes back to, when I spoke about the enterprise, you might not necessarily be working across the enterprise within your organisation, but your enterprise includes government, other entities, etc. So I think it's about, I'm not saying it's easy, but trying to bring all those people together, as you said, to work collaboratively to make that decision, or to make lots of decisions.
Well, we're certainly doing that. So there's an awful lot of networking going on, but it's very difficult to herd all the cats together into one direction. So that's the challenge, really.
And perhaps, if I may, just to think about other industries where big data and analytics has had some success in, some outcomes, and drawing on that research or body of work could help in the subtle kind of influencing of people higher up the chain. But also you see similar problems in policing, where there's a tension between, the sworn workforce and the kind of managerial workforce, sometimes in academia as well, between professional and academic staff. So it's not an uncommon problem in terms of the professional identity and the importance of that. To give you a positive example, and I am from Deakin, but I don't have a vested interest here. I'm the Department of Management. We have a Master of Business Analytics and an IBM Centre of Excellence. And in that Masters, the students actually play with real data, real platforms, real capabilities. So I think there are some positive examples of where education is being responsive, but I take your point that it could be more so.
Well, we had the issue with the IT professionals not understanding health data, and the semantics is the main thing, and about the computational knowledge management, which is major issues that we're trying to deal with, that people just don't understand, and therefore the data analytics that you can do for computer science type graduates is very different when you start applying it to health data that needs to be accurate. And the degree of accuracy is really, really important to get meaningful results.
Of course.
And so you need to keep the context and the semantics of it, and they're the sort of things that people are having enormous difficulty understanding. So in terms of the digital literacy, are you aware of the Skills for the Information Age framework? Have you people heard of that?
Yeah.
Sophia, is that being widely used in other industries, not only for IT professionals, but for others as well?
It's set as one of the key frameworks we use to develop the professional capability standard that sits behind Deakin's professional practice credentials. It was one of the assets we used for that.
Yeah. So I thought I'd just mention that because nobody mentioned that, and I thought it's a very good framework to really start identifying some of these things.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who's next?
There we are. I sit here.
You may.
Mine's a very simple one as a pair of little brain. What makes this a VUCA world as distinct from my experience of the 60s? What's the question?
I wasn't born then, I don't know.
I was just born then. What was your view of the 60s?
Well, I'm given my life, my understanding is to live is volatile. To live is full of uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. It's part of being alive. And so this idea that somehow or other this world is different from every other world we've lived in on this planet is just hubris for us. I'm different from them.
No.
When really life, I think, is this characteristic. And the different worldviews that we experience is about coming up with a wholeness.
So how many cycles of VUCA have you gone through?
62, coming on to 63.
So every year?
Every year is one of growth and change and transition, and I am who I am and what I was, but I'm not who I was.
Yeah.
And
So
that's the difficulty that we have, in that often, even in whether you be in the medical sphere or the non-medical sphere, the reality is that we are engaging with people's experiences of a different worldview, and the respect you speak of is to seek to understand. So when we listen with the intent to understand, not listening with the intent to respond. So you haven't even listened at all. So for me, I understand that life is complex. However, I also have a firm belief from how I've lived so far that it is one of growth.
Yep.
It is one of transition, and it's about being comfortable and strong enough to say, I'm happy to face whatever that is.
And you handle the things that come along each year for you.
You live with it every day and every year, whatever that may be, from change and transition.
Yeah.
And in any organisational change or any other change, it's knowing what you've got to let go, when to let it go,
And get ready for other things.
and knowing the journey in the desert of complexity and where are we going, and knowing when you've entered a space and that's temporary. And too often in organisational change, there's not a discussion with people about what am I sad to lose, what am I really excited to leave behind.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
We often just say we're all going to change now and repeat the message that we're going to change, rather than to have the discussion, so what are you sad to lose, but what are you happy to gain?
Yeah. And that links to Amanda's comment before that we do probably have a bit of a bias to think about the negative connotations of VUCA versus the fact that it may just be us living and going on the journey.
Absolutely. I did some work yesterday with some teachers at a primary school. The discussions about what they're looking for are similar. Stress, uncertainty, managing life, relationships, marriages, children, those sort of issues are part of what we do every day.
Life admin.
It's life admin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I was overseas a few weeks ago, and I was talking to some fellow travellers that I met, Aussies, that had retired, and they were saying, "Oh, it's so easy for you, you know. You just have computers and you push a button and, you know, everything happens." And, you know, they were talking about how their jobs were very manual, and I was actually saying, but our jobs are changing again as well.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's and it's working through that. They've gone through that, and we're still going through that. Our jobs will change. Our jobs might not exist.
That's
You
right.
know, so
Yes.
great.
So, okay.
Hope you have many years of VUCA.
Life willing, yes.
I think it's a good point, and it reinforces something that we know about management and business schools and organisations in particular, that it is very faddish, and a lot of these use of metaphors is taken in the wrong way. So thank you for your contribution. We have two willing people. I'll invite you to come down next.
Here's my microphone technique. Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm from IOOF, and I've got a question about the people who do what we call the grunt work, the call centre, the data entry, the people who don't currently, in the way that we see those jobs, have the luxury of working from home or you know, taking a half day off because they've got to take the cat to the vet and that sort of thing. We sort of expect them to be our infantry and do all the frontline stuff. At IOOF, so my first question would be, if that is your business structure, how do you help those people manage their stress and their lack of control as a leader? At IOOF, we're trying to move away from that regimented, please take 80 calls today business, and our people are terrified. We're trying to loosen up the management, let them talk together as teams and make their own decisions. And a lot of people are so used to being told what to do, when to come in, that they're struggling with how to manage that. So what recommendations could you offer?
Yeah. Is that to me or to?
And, well, actually, I'd like to hear from you. Yes.
Oh, okay.
We have 12,000 call centre team members in the Philippines. So it's about 16,000 people when you think about leadership, etc. And this is not to avoid the question, this is just to set the scene. A lot of those teams are industry partners, so there's a lot of contracts within Telstra. Yeah. It's really hard to even get them off the phone to train.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about sitting in a classroom to do something online, to read an article. You have to schedule it in, because in my, this is a Marisa personal opinion, this is not a Telstra thing, I think the contracts need to change. I can't go around and go change the contracts because I said, because I have no say. So within Australia, I'll use that as an example, the leaders do a lot of work with their team members in regards to team, what are they called? They actually do it in the morning, where they do like their little stand-up before they get on the... So it's not an agile stand-up, it's a bit different. But yeah, like a buzz meeting, they'll do that in the morning. Team members get RDOs to work through, so they schedule things around that. And they do give them time to actually, if they need it, that there's a lot more conversation happening. It's not as much within Australia, take this many calls, don't go to the toilet, whatever the perception is of a call centre. So they're doing a lot more of that. They're spending a lot more time with their teams. They visualise what's going on within their team as well. It's not perfect, but there's work to do. I don't think still not doing it very well. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think what I'd make is around. I think a lot of individuals in those environments, but also in others as well, probably derive a lot of self-worth and define their success by way of the quantity of the output. So it's actually kind of shifting the mindset to say, well, you are contributing just as much value and you are just as valued as an employee and you're doing just as good of a job, even if it's not the hard work that's quantifiable as such, if we're just shifting slightly what that definition of good work is. And it's not necessarily all about the output and the physical number of calls, but it might be other things too. So being mindful of what they may be. I don't know if that's what...
Yeah, that's good. Look, it's hard. What they do is really hard. Products change every 5 minutes. The customers are so mean. I'm sorry if you're a Telstra customer, but customers are so mean. The way they speak to some of our team members, and they might be sitting in Australia, and because they have an accent, they just... treated really badly. So it's hard for them. It's not easy. So that time to actually learn that new product, they don't get enough time. No. They don't. It's okay. This is changing. Price has changed, or oh no, we're not offering this in Foxtel anymore. We're offering that, and they have to learn it straight away, really quickly, and and we're looking at different ways that they can absorb that. Yeah. So it's.
Yeah, it's
not easy.
You need to instill some fun.
Yes.
You have people, what happens if the phones don't ring? Ever. So you need to instill some fun. You probably need to look at the culture. You need to look at your change management plan. What it sounds like you're dealing with is uncertainty.
Yes.
And how you reassure people that the new look is going to be okay for them and it will suit them. May not suit everybody, so look at the recruitment side of things and take them step by step. Some people get really daunted by, we're here and we're going to move to this new look.
Yeah.
And that step is huge for them, so you need to break it down.
Yes.
So break it down into 10 parts, perhaps, or 8 or whatever, depending on how complex it is, and move them slowly to those different stages.
Great, thank you very much. Okay.
Have I switched off?
No, it's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
My name is Lakmika and I'm from Deakin Business School. A lot of things were discussed in terms of leadership and how it affects organizations and surrounding context, but one of the things I think was not directly touched or not touched at all was spirituality and leadership. Spirituality is becoming a major component of all leadership aspects, and Google has recognized that. For example, recently Google had a seminar on spirituality with Deepak Chopra or people like Eckhart Tolle who come and talk to their employees. Spirituality and leadership has seen a lot of attention in academia in recent times, and also in professional programs as well, in professional articles and so forth. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that there is a relationship between the two. Now, I see a lot of this work now evolving in the US and places like Europe. I think it is a bit behind in Australia. And what are your views on holistic leadership, for example, taking in the spirituality component into the leadership roles, for example, for individuals, the organization, and to a great extent how it deals with society as a whole? Thank you.
We're behind.
We are behind.
We are so behind, yeah.
And that may be the Australian culture to say, you know, I don't meditate, or don't tell people you go to yoga and Pilates and things like that. However, some organisations, and I was involved with the ANZ Bank, and they've got a cultural breakout program that was touching on spirituality with their employees and bringing a whole person to work, and that worked really, really well. That was about 8 years ago. So some organisations are addressing it. I work for an engineering organisation. It's a little bit drier in our organisation, so we're probably behind the 8 ball on that. But if you do combine that with their leadership skills, you may not see it, but a person may bring their values into their decision making, their personal values as a leader, and where their values come from, whether it's a spiritual level or a belief level. You don't ask the person that, but you perhaps can see that in their decision making. So there is elements that are there in leadership and in business, but I don't think we label it or go looking for it as perhaps as much as, you know, other companies or regions.
That's an interesting point, but isn't those qualities that also need training and leadership development in terms of bringing into the organization? Reason being that you can see a lot of corporate governance failures very recently from my own profession, the CPA issues. So you see a lot of these things happening in and around the different organizations that are happening, around the world. You have to hone in on these specific issues of that spiritual aspect, those ethics and governance issues, and have some development training on that.
So I think it might be maybe referring to someone's belief system and their belief system and whatever that might originate in. Obviously, we're very diverse in Australia, and so but what drives those beliefs and that belief system driving the decision making and the way that somebody goes about leading, like the CPA or other organisations, is probably what can I think be further fleshed out, and maybe that's where once we sort of have a good sense of what it looks like and why it's important, it can then be applied to the employee life cycle around executive search and how CEOs are recruited and selected, how talent's managed, how leaders are developed. I think it's a really important element. And I think there was the Project Aristotle that Google looked at around high-performing teams. And the high-performing teams within Google were ones that had a leader who indeed really brought their whole self to work, really explored their belief system and divulged personal things, but in a really safe environment, and encouraged everyone to do the same. So if that's what an element of spirituality and belief might be, then maybe I think there is evidence that it's that it's powerful, and certainly worthy of investigation.
How has it worked in the US? You're saying, so have you got an example? Because I'm really interested in.
Yes, so some of the training that they do is to have spiritual talks. I'm not talking about religious, I'm talking about spirituality, which is a completely different thing altogether. Yeah. So they have, if you just Google Talks with Deepak Chopra or Eckhart Tolle, for example, you see them talking about the non-duality perspective, which is a holistic perspective, all in one. Basically, what we are not just individuals, we are part of the whole. So it's instilling these kind of concepts which a leader will go beyond just looking at himself or just his immediate surroundings, but as a whole, looking at the broader scheme of things.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
That makes absolute sense, and I think that's worthy of sort of expanding. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great. That's really interesting.
And if you can just go to the Spiritual Leadership Institute, you'll find a whole swag of stuff.
Yeah, great.
And many traditions and companies have it. But I
So-
agree with you, it's a cultural thing in Australia because people confuse spirituality and religion and structure,
all the time.
and belief and structure. It's about meaning and purpose and making a difference.
And there's definitely a lot of organisations that are now starting to spend a lot of time distilling their purpose, their reason for being. ANZ Bank is one that are spending a lot of time, and their CEO's leading it, really getting clear on their purpose. So I think absolutely
It's about that.
yeah.
It's not about some of the product, it's what's the purpose of this.
So because you didn't have a microphone, I just want to repeat the website that you mentioned.
A starting point is the Spiritual Leadership Institute.
Spiritual Leadership Institute, for those that didn't catch it.
It's American stuff, some people from Texas and Santa Clara Uni and various others, but that's an interesting starting point. But don't be afraid to read people like Chris Lowney.
Chris Lowney is another person to
who
learn
uses the
about.
word heroic leadership.
Yep.
And various other things to explore different ways of being leader. There's a number of texts and models out there, but it's about the purpose of this. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And some of our people will never work for you because it just doesn't match whatever it is and vice versa. It's leveraging that strength. That's what that's about.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, Nathalie Cholet from Telstra.
Hi, how are you going? We know each other.
So it's very interesting, the question around the spirituality, because it's connected to my question in some ways. You mentioned earlier, in the VUCA world, you need to convey a clear vision, clarity, to be a leader. It is a little bit challenging in the VUCA world and the disruption of technology when we acknowledge that there is a VUCA world. And Deakin recently in an interview confessed that he didn't know what the vision was for the next few years. And I found that quite disruptive, and yet the authenticity of acknowledging it was quite powerful. So how do you bring people on the journey? Employees need a sense of purpose, they need a common vision. If there is no vision, so is spirituality the answer? Or how do you embark them on the journey and keep them engaged?
I think it's refreshing that the CEO says we're not too sure where we're going or what it's going to look like in 3 years. Well, if that's your starting point, you then work out very quickly what you think that will be. So they would have done that, and then the journey starts from there to communicate that and to move towards that. Technology is moving very fast, and Telstra's at the forefront of that with the internet and mobile phones and everything related to that. And some of the design features you don't know about, you just need to deliver them. So you might have to have some flexibility as to what it looks like or what is the path to get there. I think it's refreshing.
Yeah.
Have you got a vision now?
We have one.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
World-class technology company by 2020. He also told the leaders to cut the BS, and that's in a video, and he uses the full word. Leaders need to opt in and be present. So it's you need to be there. No excuses. And you know that.
I think there's, my view is it's not all or nothing, and that there's actually still a lot of things that we do have control over and that we are in a position to manoeuvre and shape in our favour, whatever that might be. So it might be that it's okay to not know what it looks like in 10 years' time. So let's kind of work backwards from the 3 years and do what we can now, and I guess celebrating quick wins along the way and getting people comfortable that yes, things are uncertain, but we also still control a lot of things too and can really role model that. So I think it's hard to sort of find that happy medium, but I guess that's kind of the, let's not jump too far to the, oh goodness, we have no idea how we're going to operate, because we actually do. We can give ourselves a lot of credit that we've done it well thus far, that there's things to improve on. That's just part of the evolution, I guess.
I'm thinking more working in strategy, the incumbent and the disruptors, so the big corporate organization trying to face the changes that the disruptors, the Uber or in the telco, for example, are bringing, and trying to build a vision on that. So it's not all encompassing, it's more the big corporates. So it's an interesting journey to go through, because working in strategy, you have to build a vision, and it's constantly adjusting, but the size of the corporate is somehow a drawback. Yeah.
And I think things like leadership development programs where talented individuals or programs where people are really going to other organisations and immersing themselves in, you know, what's happening in industry and where things are evolving. I know the big business schools globally, MIT, you know, really powerful in terms of bringing that knowledge to organisations in Australia to help be at the forefront of what's going on. I guess the more that can be kind of fostered to really bring those ideas so that we can at least start to predict and think about what could be is powerful too, to inform that strategy.
Can I ask a second question? Recently, Jo Graf from Microsoft came and we attended a talk. So she works in organizational change management, and she mentioned that the future of change management is neuroscience in organization. Could you please expand on that? Because we didn't develop too much, but I found it was interesting. So that was the evolution of change in organizations.
I don't do a lot of work in this space, but from what I do know, that there's research out there that at a neuro level, the brain responds to change the same way that it does to pain. So that I think that may be I'm not sure whether she explored that in her discussion, but that might be a connection there, that it's being really mindful of the physical changes that are going on for individuals going through a change process, and weaving in some of that evidence to help support the journey and what interventions might be in supporting change management. But it's not an area that we do a lot of work in around the neuro space, but certainly, yeah, interesting area.
I keep it simple, whether it's neuroscience or attitude. You know, I would go down the path of looking at a group of people and trying to predict their attitude towards change, whether it's positive, neutral or negative. And from that I would then have different strategies around the different groups there to get them down the paths that the company or I'd like them to go. So sometimes we overcomplicate some of the... Yeah. Good question though.
Okay, we have time for two more questions. First here, and then the gentleman there.
Hi, I'm Sujit Prakashan, and basically I've just 4 weeks back started basically an ID consulting company helping people deal with change in a fastly evolving technology world. So, and I think, in my experience in 20 years, I've split my career in two halves, half the career in startups and half in large enterprises. And I kind of feel the leadership today in large companies are essentially struggling because they're trying to build an evolving and innovative mindset within their teams and try to evolve and move at a rapid pace to deal with change. But at the same time, the leadership has never worked in something as similar like a startup environment where we've been amazingly successful to bring out great innovations. So in reality, they're a fish out of water in that scenario. So I think the whole leadership force, majority of them needs to be retrained, accept the truth, get retrained, and so that it's good for them, it's good for their workforce, it's good for their companies. What do you guys think about that?
I would say tell some of your managers to go off for a month or two and explore the world, go and help a friend, volunteer, go to a startup, and you come back and you tell us what you've learned. We're not bold enough to do that. in our organisation, we've got people who have got many, many years tenure. And I think, would you get a job in another organisation? And perhaps we should say, go and explore out there and come back and we'll benefit from you doing that. We're very set in our ways. But yeah, you do need to rely on people's experience and where that has been built up and where it comes from. Will we achieve that? Maybe not. But what you're saying, your message might be to the people you're interacting and consulting with is you need to have a broader mindset. What if you were a startup? What would you do? What would be different? You're an established company. How can you keep agile? What do you need to do in those areas? So maybe that's your role.
I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with a potential customer about a couple of weeks back, and it was about bringing an automation into their entire workforce. And his plan that he had initially developed was to say, I got 100 people, I'm going to bring it down to 60 people. And I said, the moment you do that, culture's gone out of the window. The reality is you've got a 50 million business, you're being supported by so many people. Think of the same thing. If you want to bring the right culture and automation into it, the same people would support you even when you go to 100 million to 150 million. So even if your cost keeps coming down while you bring it in, while your business grows, so your costs are in reality coming down. But if you want to have that evolving picture, that means your whole team needs to be with you on a mission rather than on a job or a task. And that's how you'll make a difference to the company. And I think they've taken it on board, but I don't know how many people out there are really willing to accept that and take that on board.
I love going to this team. Whenever I meet with them, I actually go to their office because their Fluor is awesome. Innovation labs at Telstra, yes, it's beautiful. I want to work on that floor. They've just opened Murudi in Melbourne. There's Murudi in Sydney, so you're aware of that. So Murudi sponsors about 10 startups. There was a television series on Channel 7 recently about it. They were following Sydney. So there's opportunities for, startups to come in and work within the system and actually get access to a lot of information and be mentored and sponsored by Telstra. But the innovation labs also run sprints with the managers and their teams on innovation. And not everyone takes that up. So that goes back to the enterprise view I was talking about before, because some leaders just want to do their own thing and think their way's the best way. But really bringing people in to follow the methodology, the double diamond methodology that's been developed, and to work through the sprints and test it and work with customers. And so we are nurturing that, but your point, not everyone takes it up.
And again, from a training perspective, I think there's a big change. I personally have a leadership coach to help me with get better at what I do. But I think even the training mechanisms, when I speak to a lot of them, they need to also change in a sense, because I think most of the times the way change is happening at such a rampant pace. I think even the leadership programs are still pretty old style, because they're, in one liner way to say is, even in the age of emergence of AI, the real challenge is about how do we really leverage the human intelligence, and that's where I think the training programs from a leadership point is still not tuned about how well can we leverage the human potential.
Yeah, and I think in many ways, distilling it down into what are the key things that we need to develop, and having that, you're almost better off teaching people less, but having them really critical things that will actually make an impact, and holding them accountable for the application of that learning back in the workplace is really important. So if it's one thing that they take away but they're held accountable to demonstrate it, that's better than a day workshop and taking in lots of information but then never applying it. So keep it simple is what I would recommend, and really put just as much effort at the back end around the application of skills, the accountability, what's going to happen if we don't apply this, as well, and as much effort there as you would in the front end design of the content or whatever it is that you're teaching people in.
Final question.
Oh, thank you. My honor.
Richard from Armstrong's Flooring. Thank you. I learned a lot of new terminologies. I'm a bit old school. Only reason is working for a manufacturing company. So I just try to understand, is that still, we appreciate some of the old value? Like, I haven't heard like discipline, like sacrifice, like loyalty. Especially like in my environment, like if my factory equipment is shut down, I can't afford, like, the work-life balance is not there. If the cat is in the vet, but the machinery is shut down, I have to go there 6 a.m. at tomorrow, like Saturday, Sunday, 24/7. So again, back to the earlier comment, the world changed, but doesn't mean we're now more kind of complicated than before, because our factory starts like 1969. So it's really stay there. This machine was running every single day, not really, but most of the days. But those values are just the key words. I think probably you will hear a lot 30 years ago, but I haven't heard single ones today. We still value those sacrifice, those like integrity, those kind of a discipline, especially discipline, I would say, in the factory is very, very important. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and it's a really good reminder too of the power of customised interventions, whatever they may be. That it's what works for one sector, what works for one size of organisation is not going to necessarily work for another, and being really mindful of the learning objectives and the context that leadership's being applied, leadership's being demonstrated, it's being developed is really, really important. And I think there's a lot of an appetite for organisations to really take that time to work out what I'd call are their unique competencies or unique capabilities. What is it that makes them them, and play to that. I think maybe sort of this war for talent and this war that organisations battle for really good people made it kind of all the power going to the candidates' hands, and it was all about them being really ambitious and really curious, which are all really important for potential. But you're right, having stickability, putting in the hard yards is also really important. So if that's what works for your organisation, and they are the success factors that differentiate high performance for your company, then play to that. Be mindful of external factors and strategically what you need to be conscious of. Weave that in slowly, maybe bit by bit, without totally reinventing the wheel. And you start to form your own model of what good means for you, and develop accordingly.
Thank you. Very good.
That was a really good answer. That was spot on. So you need to show, what is it that makes your organisation successful, and put reward and recognition programs in place to assist you on that. So if it's stability, doing the hard yards, loyalty, structure, you reward and you appreciate that it becomes part of your culture, part of your values in the organisation. And then you put your leadership around that.
I was going to mention reward as well. So reward for us. You've given me a different perspective, so thank you. So reward for us is maybe working from home and not coming in and whatever. But reward for you would look different. That's, and your team will appreciate that, and the leaders, helping the leaders to support the way you reward, and that might mean half a day off, or obviously the business still needs to make money, so whatever works for you. So what does that look like?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so whether we agree with this label of the VUCA world, it's been controversial this morning. I think we all appreciate that things are changing, businesses change, ideas change, principles change, and I hope that, as Marisa has very eloquently mentioned right at the end, that by coming here today, you've been able to hear and appreciate a set of different perspectives and learn a bit more about leadership today and some of the principles and applications and development that are required. It does reinforce, as was mentioned, that context matters, and we need to think very carefully about context. So on that note, I will thank you for your participation. It's been a pleasure hosting you this morning, and please join me in thanking our panellists.